Are we all set? Okay. We will call to order the meeting of the ELMA, and we'll start with House Bill 87, and the prime sponsor is here, so we'll bring him right up and let him speak. Welcome, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's an honor to be at your august company today, as my bills never make it this far usually. I am the prime sponsor of House Bill 87, relative to the definition of electioneering. I brought this bill because when I went to vote at the polls, I was told that I must remove something that I was wearing, which abridged my right of free speech. It wasn't super political, it was a white hat. And the moderator said, you must remove that in order to vote. So effectively, she abridged my right of free speech and my right to vote. So that's why I brought this. It crosses political lines. I've seen folks from the other side of the aisle be restricted the same way. And I did a little research. I found out that the Supreme Court had ruled on this. I believe it's United States versus Wyoming, or one of those big states out west. And their restrictions were ruled unconstitutional. So that's why I brought this in the legislature to correct our rules. And then as it made through, an amendment was added so that the people working at the polls could not wear these items in case they would accidentally influence someone to vote one way or another. And I agree with the amendment, and that's why I'm presenting HB 87 as amended. I agree with it, and I would hope that you do too. As a closing remark, I would like to paraphrase I believe a quote from Voltaire. I may not agree with your opinion, but I will fight to the death your right to have it. Thank you.
Questions from the committee members? Not seeing any. Thank you very much. And Representative Bertrand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
Would you check your microphone? I don't see the red light. Thank you.
That throws me off in our committee meetings too. Red means stop, and yet we have to push it to go. But I'm here to oppose House Bill 87 as it's currently written. While I respect the intent that the sponsor had for this bill regarding the confrontation he experienced when he was trying to cast a ballot, the way the bill is written opens up the polling place to anybody at any time from any place to hang around inside the polling place wearing campaign paraphernalia. And I think that just goes a little too far. I know that in Nashua, some of the senators know this, I was city clerk in Nashua for 16 years and deputy in Manske. And some of our polling places are very small. To have campaign workers congregating in the public area, I think actually impedes the progress of the people that are in there to register to vote or to cast ballots. Some of our polling places are very big. And in some cases in gymnasiums, our moderators will pull out some of the bleachers so people can sit and gather in the bleachers. But this sets up a situation where, one, you're putting bodies in a small place that really don't need to be there for the purposes of voting, and they're wearing campaign paraphernalia. Or second, they can climb into the bleachers and conduct pep rallies wearing all their campaign paraphernalia. So that's the reason I object to the bill. The Supreme Court ruling, which the sponsor referenced, was actually a Minnesota Voters Alliance versus Manske. And the problem that the Supreme Court had with the Minnesota bill is that there really was no reasonable line as to what constituted electioneering activity and what didn't. In its decision, the court cited two states' laws, Texas and California, I believe, which it said did define what political meant clear enough to be enforced uniformly throughout the state. And in its decision, it basically said the state must draw a reasonable line. The state must be able to articulate some sensible basis for distinguishing what may come in from what must stay out. And in the case of Minnesota, it did not define the term political. So for that reason, although it's an interesting court decision, I don't think it should allow for the polling places to be open up for any kind of campaign activity. And that's the extent of my remarks. Be happy to answer any questions.
Questions from committee members? Seeing none, thank you very much.
All right, thank you. And if I may, I'll leave a copy of that decision with the aide. Okay, thank you.
Yep. The only other one on this list is Ms. Bascom, and she did not indicate whether she wanted to speak or not. Is there anyone else out there that wants to speak? If not, we'll close the public hearing. Is there anybody that's like sent the 400? We've got almost 10 minutes. I have a motion to go into executive session, seconded by Senator Birdsell. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we are in executive session. First one that I thought of was 400.
We have amendments.
And I probably need it myself. Senator Perkins-Coker.
Move on to pass.
Thank you, Senator Gray. No, I don't. I have it electronically. Thank you. Senator Gray, I move Amendment 0725S, and I'll speak to it if I may.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
I'll move on to pass on the bill.
Oh, thank you. Second.
I thought I heard her say,
She said the amendment.
oh, okay. Close enough.
Thank you, Donna.
Yes, ma'am.
Now I've moved the amendment. So this amendment is to address concerns raised by the judicial branch, and I introduced the changes at our last executive session. They are essentially to make sure that the tolling period runs from the date that the record is delivered to the court, not from the date of the land use decision, and provides an extension, which essentially amounts to an extra 40 days for the court to address the appeal. So those were the substantive changes made. When we were in executive session last time, the question raised was whether which sections of the bill this should apply to, and so those have been addressed on page 2, lines 1 through 3. The sections noted are 8, 10, and 11, and those were the ones suggested by the judicial branch. I was able to review it, and those are the sections of the bill that contain judicial deadlines. So in order to comply with the RSA governing judicial procedure, we would have this bifurcated effective date of January 1st for sections 8, 10, and 11, and for the remainder of the bill to take effect 60 days after passage.
All right. Other comments? Seeing none. We have a motion of ought to pass on amendment 0725. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing no opposed. That is 5-0. Have ought to pass on the amendment, or ought to pass as amendment.
So moved.
And Discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Do we have a motion for consent?
Mr. Chairman, I think this bill is a really,
We have an objection to
Comprehensive,
consent, so
bipartisan
that we,
I just think
We'll
it
do
would be
that.
important. I think, I'm sure Senator Bradley was involved, Senator Perkins Coco would want to say something about the good work.
and
that we-
Senator Perkins Coker will take it out.
Thank you.
And I don't want to crowd the other bill too much, so while got a couple of extra minutes, if the next one goes as quickly, you may want to volunteer one of your bills to be the next one that we exec, if we have time between the next two hearings. So I'll accept the motion to come out of executive session.
So moved.
Okay, we've moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And we're out of executive session, and it'll be just a minute or two before we start House Bill 144.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're it, Paul. You know, when time comes. I've got another minute and a half here. I'll take my position. All right.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay, I've got quarter past, so.
Okay, thank you, Mr.
President Bergeron, we're opening the hearing on House Bill 144.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. House Bill 144, I believe, was the only bill that went to a subcommittee in election law in the House last year and this year. And it came out in this form, and the committee supported it as amended on a 20-0 vote. Representative Quayle's note for the committee, I think, kind of sums it up rather succinctly on what we were trying to do. The bill as amended modifies the absentee ballot application form to improve its usability for voters and provide consistency in the categories of eligibility for absentee voting on the application. The modifications take place on the form and the absentee affidavit envelope. If the committee would bear with me, I can highlight what some of the things are that we did. That's the reason I asked that the current form be passed out so you can see what's actually being changed, the before and after, if you will. One of the things that one of the members wanted to have occur is that in some cases of the form, it would simply say to vote in this town ward. In others, it would say city, town, or unincorporated place. So one of the modifications uses that same phrase throughout the form and on the affidavit envelope. Another change that occurs is in Roman numeral 1, I hereby declare that I am a duly qualified voter. And the next sentence starts off, I am absent from the town or city where I am domiciled. The instructions say to check 1, and in our experience, voters don't read the whole thing on that second one, and they say, well, I'm qualified to vote, and I am absent, and they check both off, which then requires that the city or town clerk do a follow-up to find out what the case might be, or even in some cases ask the voter to fill out another one. So on line 13 of the bill, as amended, or 14, we changed that to read, I am unable to register to vote in person because I am absent from the city, town, or unincorporated place, and will be until after the election, and I am unable to register in person. That was the intent of this particular checkoff language. In some cases, people might be in Florida, they might be away at college, and they want to register to vote and cast an absentee ballot. And back in 2006, when the Help America Vote Act Planning Committee was working on language to modify election laws, it was brought up that why can't we just do this in one process? Mail the voter registration application materials and the absentee ballot. So that's what the intent of this particular section was right from the beginning. Now, of course, the person, when all the paperwork comes back, the person has to first be added to the checklist, and if they didn't fill it out properly, they're not, and their absentee ballot won't be counted. But that's the reason for that particular change. The next modification occurs on lines 22 to 26. You notice that all reference to the presidential primary election absentee ballot request is deleted or struck out, but all that's really done is that's moved to the very last reason on the list of reasons why someone would be requesting an absentee ballot. It's still there. It's just, why put it in the middle of all the other reasons that it can occur for every single election? Just put it at the bottom of the list because it only pertains to one election every 4 years. On page 2, another change is on line 5. Struck out is the words am elderly or affirm or I have a physical disability. The subcommittee felt, and the committee as well, that that was just wordy. It wasn't needed. We could simply say, I would otherwise vote in person, but I have concerns for my safety traveling in the storm. So it reduces some of the language that's there. Lines 17 through 21, that's just to format those checkoff boxes to read the same way. General election to be held on, state primary election to be held on, state primary election to be held on. So the language is just parallel in that section of the form. The other change that was made occurs on page 3, lines 11 through 13. On the current form for absentee ballot requests, on the first page it says at the bottom, you must complete the back side. And then you go to the back side, and right above the applicant's signature, there's a request for the applicant's phone number and applicant's email address. During the last state election, I had inquired of the Attorney General's office if a voter had to provide the phone number and email address in order to get the absentee ballot. And he said, well, no, they don't have to. So the amendment that's being made here is that applicant's phone number and email address is still being requested, but now they appear underneath the signature of the voter. And that way, actually, if an election official obtains this information afterwards, they can add it to the form and for reference purposes. We still want it. I know that the clerks find it very helpful if there's a need to contact a voter because they did something wrong, and if they've provided the information to do so, it's very handy. The absentee ballot affidavit envelope, the Senate recently amended House Bill 292 and made some changes, and the subcommittee also made a change to House Bill 292, so those two changes are very small. In the case of the subcommittee, on page 4, line 5, we added the words or unincorporated place, again to be consistent with what was said earlier. What the Senate amendment did to the affidavit envelope occurs on lines 13 and 14, where underneath voter signature, the Senate added a line for a print name. So to put this, make this consistent with House Bill 292, it might need an amendment to simply add a line that says print name right under voter signature on line 13. And that, in a nutshell, is what we tried to do with the absentee voter request form.
Questions from committee members? I'm not going to feel
Okay.
all right. Senator Susie and I have had many discussions over the word disability. So if we look at page 1, line 28, I'm looking at putting in some clarifying remarks. Let me skip that for a minute and then I'll come back to it. On page 3, line 11, provide one or both of the following instead of just provide one. That's the applicant's phone number, email address. I don't think that the or both will cause you too many heartburn.
No, it wouldn't.
And then over on page 4, line 13, where you suggested the print name, I also would request that we change that address if we're going to eliminate the outer envelope on all of the ballots coming back, except for those that actually do go in the mail. The clerks have requested that that address be added to the form.
May I ask, Senator, is that to the affidavit envelope then? That's what they're asking for? To have the name added to the affidavit envelope?
Right. Because to have the address added there, because if you don't have the outer envelope, which contains the address, return address from the person, then there could be some confusion. So adding it back in there, being mindful that in the last session of legislature, we did combine those affidavits together, which should give us enough room on there to do all of that.
Yeah. Personally, I have no objection to it. I can understand the rationale for doing it. And when the ballots are removed from the envelope, the election officials aren't supposed to be looking at, who cast that ballot. They're putting them aside and they unfold them after the fact. So I can see the reason for that.
And going back to the disability thing, right now in RSA 657:1, that paragraph talks about different things. We added to that a while back where a individual who's caring for their children, I would suggest making that a small a and then adding a b, which says disability includes the physical, medical, or developmental condition that impairs, interferes, or limits a person's ability to cast a ballot at the polling place on election day. Again, I'm going to let people mull over that a little bit. But what we're trying to do is to make it clear in statute, for the discussions that I've had with Senator Susie, that it is disability, if you look it up in the dictionary, would include all of that, but some people aren't taking exception to the word disability being used there. And so if you take some of those words and then you go back into page 1, line 28, put a parent behind it and say includes medical, cognitive, whatever, per RSA, whatever, I think it gets us there. So I didn't, since you're the prime sponsor of the bill, just wanted to make sure that you had the opportunity to comment on those.
So far, I haven't really heard anything that I would object to. One of our goals was to keep the form short, or as short as we could. if the term disability is being defined on the form, and maybe some of the terms you've used covers this, but I think we'd want to make sure we're also covering psychological issues, agoraphobia, maybe anxiety, reasons that people won't or can't go to polling place because they're not physically disabled, they just, for whatever reasons, can't go. I'm just throwing that out, but.
And that is part of the reason why, I said physical, medical, developmental condition.
Okay.
All right,
Thank
so
you. Yeah.
all of those agoraphobia or whatever, would fall into there and then down below. Not that, it has to somehow limit your ability to perform the functions that you would need at the polling place, kind of thing.
Okay.
But I don't intend to do that executive today. I would, take and make a formal amendment to that so everybody had the chance to look at it and comment on it before we did anything. I just, since I had you here as a captive audience representative, I thought I'd bore you with my musings, I guess.
Well, Senator, believe it or not, I'm not a person that gets bored by dry election law, so it's quite fine.
Can I ask just one question?
Yes, ma'am.
Representative Bergeron, you mentioned a bill that we may need to amend to be consistent with another bill. Was that 292?
I think it was
I just want to make sure I have the number.
262. It's already been sent back to the House. Let me make sure that's the one. 292. I'm sorry.
92,
It was
I thought it was
292.
92, okay.
And the only thing that would need to be done if you're amending this bill is on, page 4, underneath voter signature, put a line that says print name, and I suppose if you're going to add the address there as well, that would be the place to do it. If that's done and this bill comes back to the House, we won't even need 292 because it'll be saying the same thing in that particular line item.
I do have that
Yep.
as a
I wanted
markup to mine, so. All right. No, seeing no other questions for you.
All right, thank you.
Representative. And is there anyone else that would like to tell us your thoughts about House Bill 144? Seeing none, it'll be just a minute before we start the next one. I don't see any representatives out there. So I'm taking Representative Wells and Representative Hill are not here. So we will open the hearing on House Bill 514 relative to the ballot column rotation. The bill repeals the requirement that the average deviation from equal rotation for the first party column position on the ballots be no greater than 1%. And since there's no one here, we'll count that as the introduction of the bill. And Secretary of State David Scanlon, it takes me a while to get, changed around here, so.
It's taking me a while too, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm David Scanlon, Secretary of State, here in support of the bill. Although I have a couple of items that I'd like to discuss about the bill with you, starting with just a little history on this. Up until the early 2000s, the ballots were designed by, trying to think of the best way to say this. The ballot design was very simple. When it came to candidates' names on the ballot, they were simply listed in alphabetical order, starting with the surname that began with the letter A, moving through the alphabet to Z. And then in addition to that, the party columns were assigned to the political party, the official political party that received the highest number of votes in the prior election. So if the Democrats was the largest vote getter, then the column for the Democrat Party would be listed first, followed by the Republican Party, followed by other, and vice versa. If the Republicans had the most votes in the prior general election, then their column would be listed first, followed by the Democrat, followed by other, and that applied statewide. So around 2005, 2006, Senator Cliff Below at the time filed a suit against the Secretary of State in his official capacity, claiming that there was a primacy effect on the ballot for those individuals or the party that was listed first. And after the case was heard, the judge ruled that he decided that there was, in fact, a primacy effect and that we had to implement a rotation scheme not only for candidates' names appearing on the ballot, but also for the party columns on the ballot. And that was, we figured out a way to rotate or to randomize the list of candidates on the ballot and also the columns. And the way the columns were rotated was on the basis of Senate district. So the two political parties each drew a number out of a hat, 1 through 24, and then we had somebody representing the other candidates or other parties to do the drawing for the others. So based on that random drawing, there would be 8 Senate districts that were chosen for the Republicans, 8 Senate districts that were chosen for the Democrats, and 8 Senate districts that were chosen for the other. And then the columns were then rotated throughout the state by Senate district based on, in the districts where the Republicans were chosen first, that column would appear first in all of those Senate districts that had been drawn out of the hat. I know it seems confusing, but it was a process that everybody could understand because you could put it on paper. There was a drawing, there was transparency, and there was no question who was chosen for which column on the ballot. After we tried that process for a couple of elections, Senator Below did not feel like that was good enough, that it didn't rotate enough. So he introduced a bill that we currently use in statute, which is a very complicated formula that I cannot explain to anybody that would ask me, how do you determine, which town goes in which party column that goes first on the ballot? The only two people that I know of that can do this well is Cliff Below, number one, and Anthony Stevens, who has since retired in our office, but he works for us still part-time. And if we leave the law the way it is, I would certainly enlist Anthony to come back and, and do the districts, which we are required to do after every redistricting of the state. What this bill does, as currently written, relaxes the requirement that we get to within a 1% deviation and makes it a 2% deviation. Anthony Stevens has looked at the bill, and he has said that in the 2 weeks full-time that it takes him to put the rotation scheme together, it might save him 3 or 4 hours time, which is certainly better than, in my opinion, than leaving it the way it is. We can live with the bill as it's currently written and make sure that we have the ballots ready to go for the general election this fall. But I guess the question that I'm tossing out to the committee is, what is more important to the process? Transparency, where we can explain a process on how the rotation takes place, versus trying to do it to such an exact science that we eliminate the deviation as much as possible among all races on the ballot. But in so doing, we have a process that is almost impossible to explain to anybody that might ask the question, how did you do this? My preference is for transparency, but I'll leave that policy decision up to you, and I'd be happy to try and answer any questions.
Questions from the committee? I guess, what's in front of me is the 1% going to 2%. I have no idea of what this transparency would be and how that would be written. Does the Secretary of State have at least a draft of the legislation that he says that would offer that transparency?
Mr. Chairman, I would be happy to draft some language that would reflect the way that we did the party column rotations by Senate district prior to this bill passing, and get it to you in short order.
Okay, I think that there should be an analysis of that and how it meets the current court decisions. And, at least from your attorney on staff, if not the Attorney General's office.
We can certainly do that, Mr. Chairman. The court was, my understanding was the court was fine with doing the party column rotations by Senate district, because that is the way that we did the districts after the court issued its order.
Okay, then.
So the proposal would be to go back to doing the Senate district rotation?
Yes.
I don't know whether I support that or not, because
I wanna see it.
without seeing it, I guess I would also like to see an attempt made, if this doesn't do it, to explain, how it is done. So anyway, we'll put this bill, not planning on executing it for a while anyway, so we'll give you some time, or Patty, as maybe in her new position, that she'll get involved. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much,
Thank you.
Mr. Secretary. And is there anyone else out there that wants to speak on House Bill 514? Seeing none, we'll close the hearing on 514 and accept a motion to go into executive
So moved.
session. Moved by Senator Susie, seconded by Senator Bertzel. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are in executive session. All right. Senate Bill 241.
Yes.
I have, yeah, 0512S.
Let's get back to my page here.
Any interim? Do I have a motion?
I move interim study.
Okay. Senator Bertzel has moved interim study, and seconded by Senator Ward. Discussion?
Well, it would not be able to introduce an amendment to interim study. I guess my question is the view that the existing districts should remain the way they are? Or is there something else coming forward that we're not aware of?
I believe, Senator, that when we looked at your amendment, the population deviation was quite high compared to the deviation that currently exists in the districts as they are out there. And certainly you know that I have put a priority on that in all of the redistricting that we've done. The population deviation as they exist right now, as best my memory allows, 2.27% was the thing that I got, plus or minus at least a little bit given, and having spoke to many people and received many emails on this subject, and certainly accepting all that input, I don't know that I can do better. Which leaves me with a bill that, you know, if I amend it, I don't know that I pass it. We've got the comments from lots of people out there in the press, and seeing that it does not violate equal population, it is contiguous, it meets all of the check boxes that are mandated on us, that I do support the motion to interim study. Senator Ward?
Question?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Hit your mic button, please.
I don't see my town in any of these districts. Is that because it is so small and it doesn't count?
No, it's got to be in there. But in the amendment,
Yeah,
well, the amendment is not before us right now. The amendment is in your packet, but what is before us is interim study, which would leave, if nothing else is passed, would leave us with RSA 662-2 unchanged, and having it unchanged, I believe that your town is listed in that.
I thought it's listed in the original bill. I just was curious, not seeing it in the amendment at all. So,
Mr. Chairman, could I just say, I understand, I appreciate the comments that have been made about why we would, or why members believe interim study might be the effective thing to do. I would just say that I think what we did here repeatedly when we were soliciting public testimony about redistricting in general was that Council District 2 in particular was most frequently cited as an example of salamander gerrymandering, and I do understand and appreciate that population deviation was your primary concern in redrawing these maps, and I know that the existing maps do fit within that. I'll vote against the interim study, but I would hope that we could perhaps revisit the issue, particularly of Senate District 2, because, of Executive Council District 2, because I think that was one that was viewed as problematic.
Senator Perkins Cook.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to echo the comments of my colleague, Senator Susi. You know, I think the hope in this process to redistrict the Executive Council districts was to arrive at something more reflective of the communities of interest in our state, as we've discussed on the other maps. You know, the goal of this exercise should be fair representation of all of our citizens, and we all together sat through hours of listening to our residents ask, for more fair districts to be drawn. Senator Susi and I have brought a proposal to do that and spoken to the benefits of what we've proposed, but to keep the same Executive Council districts means that we're keeping, our Dragon District, which stretches across the state, and I know Durham and Keene are both lovely places, but, they're in different parts of the state, and so they can't be considered a community of interest. So I'll also be voting against the interim study recommendation in the hope that we can bring this back up and hopefully pass a map that's more representative.
Further comments? Okay. All those in favor of interim study say aye. Aye. All opposed to interim study say nay.
Nay.
And the vote is 3-2. And I will take that out. And Senator Susi, your bill is 253
Correct.
or 254?
Four. Yeah.
254. Do I have a motion on Senate Bill 254?
Well, I would move on to pass.
Second.
Senator Susi moves on to pass. Senator Perkins Cuoca seconds that motion.
And I would just ditto the comments previously made. I don't think we need to belabor the point, but I do think that we do need to make some change. I think that District 2 in particular is probably a bad example of how districts should be drawn. I will leave it at that.
Comments? Seeing none, all those in favor of vote to pass say aye.
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 All those opposed say nay. Nay.
Nay.
And I have a
Okay.
2-3. Do I have a subsequent motion? I will move interim study.
Second.
Seconded by Senator Birdsall. Any further comments? Okay. All those in favor of interim study, say aye. And any opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Nay, sorry.
I get a 3-2, and I will take that one out also.
Okay.
House Bill 52.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, what's the number?
52.
House Bill 52.
5-2.
Probably look for the thickest one in your packet.
Separate binder for redistricting, there's so many.
I,
I literally put them all, asked Jen to help me put them in a separate.
I think that after today's meeting, that I'll have 5 left pounds to carry around with me because they'll be in the permanent file.
That is true. Mr. Chair, I move on to pass.
Okay, we have a motion of ought to pass. Do I have a second? I will second it. Discussion.
Well, Mr. Chair, I have two things. One, I do have an amendment that had previously been distributed. It's Amendment 0503. And I would move ought to pass on the amendment.
We have a motion of ought to pass on amendment 0503S,
Second.
seconded by Senator Perkins Quokka.
So I guess just to sum up what the amendment does, I know all of you have seen it, but the existing districts have been very similar to the way they currently are for the last 140 years. And the only changes that have been made are to balance population between the two districts. And usually that involved going along the line and moving a town here or there. This amendment would maintain that practice. So the population of the existing CD1 is 17,945 people, larger than 2. So this proposed map moves one town, Hampstead, from CD1 to District 2. The resulting difference in population is just 51 people. And that proposed map continues to keep both districts competitive and continues with the long history of not making the districts, without changing the districts other than for purposes of balancing the population. And, you know, as with the Executive Council maps that we just took up, if truly the issue is to try to keep them within the smallest deviation, I think the amendment that I've proposed with simply moving one town comes as close to, with only 51 people difference, as close to a small deviation as you're going to get. So I would encourage my colleagues to consider supporting this amendment.
So the total deviation is 51 people from the highest to the lowest?
Yeah, so of the two congressional districts, so right now, the existing population of CD1, as I understand it, is 17,945 people more than 2. So
Yeah.
if you were to move one town, which is the town of Hampstead, with a population of 8,998, from 1 to 2, it brings them to within 51 people, which is about as equal as you can get with as little disruption as you can get.
Okay. And the current map from the House has a total of, I think it's either 88 to the plus and 89 to the minus, or reverse of that. And I also, when I was reading Manchester versus Gardner, looked at the way the judges, looked at evaluating the maps. And certainly they spoke in there about maps that meets the criteria, maps that don't meet the criteria, that kind of thing. And they did speak, in my words, not their words, that there may be occasions where you will find a different way to actually do better. Okay? So understanding that and looking at the House district, knowing again that they met all the criteria, their positive, negative percentage-wise by the courts has been 0.75%, and that the population that I came up with a quick calculation is 0.01 something, so it's less than 0.02% of deviation, where 0.75 would be allowed, and I'm putting that in quotes, that I still think that the plan that was developed by the House meets all the criteria, and that I can support that. So right now, Senator Perkins Quokka is going to be recognized.
Thank you, Chairman. And so here we are today voting on HB 52 without an amendment as it came over from the House. And so just to be clear, without amending this today, we're voting on what people have been colloquially referring to as the lobster claw district. As Senator Susi noted, this is overturning over 140 years of history of, Portsmouth, for example, being in CD1. And so, I think we should amend the map as Senator Susi and I have proposed, which, instead of moving over 300,000 people in our state from one district to another, would merely move just under 9,000. It would do what is required by redistricting, which is just simply to rebalance the population. But, the HB 52 that we're being asked you to vote on today disenfranchises voters in both of our congressional districts because it creates a political advantage in both districts that makes the votes of our voters count less, and that's not our job. So I hope that we can support Amendment 0503S that we brought forward in honor of the innumerable hours of testimony that we've heard from our citizens. It's important for us to be respecting county lines, to be respecting communities of interest, to be respecting SAUs. And, I think it's our job to do the best we can, not to do the legal minimum, but rather, to draw the fairest maps that we are able. And so I would be in favor of Amendment 0503S, but against HB 52 as proposed.
Okay, is there any other discussion on the amendment? Calling the question on the amendment. All those in favor of amendment to 2022-0503S, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay.
Nay.
The amendment fails. We have the motion of ought to pass on the floor. Is there further discussion or amendment? Seeing none, call the question. All those for ought to pass signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, say nay.
Nay.
3-2.
More
And
like one,
Sounded
two.
like 2-1, like we won.
I guess they, just, yeah, I guess so.
I said something.
All right, and since I've taken out most of these redistricting ones, I will put my name in against this one also for taking it out. All right, we've got plenty of bills to exec. Does any of the senators have bills that they want to make sure that we get to right away?
I have copies of amendments for
I guess I would like to talk about 418 for a minute. As when we've talked about verification of voters' qualifications before, I have done my best to make them so that they are as unobtrusive on the individual as I can. I need to reread 418's amendment again, but I don't know that I see a distinction in there between a person who is registering to vote for the first time and someone who is signing an affidavit because they forgot their license. I believe that there are things that we can do for that person who is already registered to help identify them. One of those things would be if we had connectivity so that the supervisor of the checklist could actually log into ElectionNet. It could be simple as going in and looking up their age, which is not a publicly releasable piece of information that we have. And certainly if the person is 20 and appears 50, or is 50 and appears 20, vice versa, that I can make a reasonable guess that this individual might need further investigation. I'm not going to say that they're wrong, right, or whatever. I'm not sure whether ElectionNet keeps previous addresses, but I know that it keeps votes that I've done, so, ballots I've taken in certain primaries. It contains other information in there in the non-public data that is there. If the person provided that phone number or email address, as we saw in the application that we have heard the testimony on today for an absentee ballot, that information would be in there. And if we do get to the place where we are going to be able to transfer the last 4 digits of a social security number between systems, that would be, again, another piece of information. So I have many questions to discuss with the Secretary of State's office and with Senator Gaida on how we can focus this down and do the things that we need to do. I believe that if someone shows up, and during the time I was a moderator, an individual, this particular person was known to me, not by sight, but by reputation and writing various things in various newspaper articles. But was very incensed when I said that I was going to follow him out and see what car he got into so I could copy down the license plate number. That, and certainly because I did know his reputation, we didn't do that. But again, we need to do those things that are reasonable and we're able to do to make sure that the people do qualify. And it may include provisional ballots like 418 has. And I will shut up now and listen to all of your comments. Senator Bertzel.
I do. I just want to remind, I have spoken to Tina Guilford. She's a moderator in Derry. She's worked with Senator guide on this to make sure that it follows what they need to do. So I haven't had a chance to review it, but I am, after tomorrow, I'm going to talk to her and kind of walk through the changes that she has done. But I know I spoke with her not last week, the week before, and she said that they were pretty close to finishing up. So I'm presuming this is the amendment that she put forth with him.
Any other comments on that before we move on to, yes, Senator Perkins Quokka?
I just wanted to share and echo your concerns that we're conflating registering to vote with, forgetting your license on the day you show up to vote. So I appreciate the concerns you raised, and I look forward, hopefully, to the next version of this amendment.
All right, seeing nothing else. Senate Bill 243 is the transfer on death. Senator Perkins Quokka, I think, was honchoing that one for us.
So on Senate Bill 243, the concerns raised where we were going to draft an amendment where that, sorry, my mic on. The concerns raised on 243 where we were going to draft an amendment were two. One was that a transferee needs the ability to disclaim property, so we wouldn't want it to be an automatic transfer without notice. Because, for various reasons, someone may not want to accept it. And then secondly, that we needed an ability for the creditor to, or any creditor of an estate to satisfy their claims. Again, as anticipated, I think this bill kind of addresses estates where, the primary home was the primary asset of the estate. And so it's attempting to make the probate process easier on the surviving issue by having the automatic transfer. Once I reviewed the bill again, I believe both of these concerns are addressed by the language of the bill. And so, Chairman, I did share an email with you over the break to see if you agreed. But on page 4, lines 1 and 2 address disclaimer and give a beneficiary the right to disclaim all or part of a beneficiary's interest as provided by RSA 563B. That RSA is the Uniform Disclaim of Property Act. And while the language of that RSA does not specifically address real property, it does not expressly exclude real property, and it does require, where appropriate, recording of a disclaimer. And so I believe it addresses our situation adequately, if the committee were to agree. And on liability for creditor claims, also on page 4, in the changes to 563D 15, to the extent the transfer's probate estate is insufficient to satisfy an allowed claim against the estate or statutory allowance, the estate may enforce the liability against the property transferred at the transferor's death by this deed. So it seemed to me that the two concerns that were raised were addressed by the language of the bill, and so I don't have an amendment for you today, but I welcome discussion if there are further concerns.
My one question on the disclaimer deals with doing the title search of the property afterward. If that transfer on death is in there and a copy of the disclaimer is not included in there, in those records, at the county level, that certainly could cloud the title, when the title search is done.
Sure.
So I'm going to request one of our fine attorneys to look at that part of it, since you say that RSA 563, doesn't talk about real property, that this language may need to be changed to say that the disclaimer is filed, with the Register of Deeds against the property, such that, it may be cited in, any investigation of the title.
Okay, I think that's fine. I would assume that a disclaimer of, a recorded property would need to be recorded to be effective. So I think that your point raised is valid. It may be that in fact we want to make that change in 563B, to disclaim real property, to record a disclaimer, but understand the concern and I can do that. The other way I thought about handling it was to have sort of a notice period before the deed is recorded, but I think that kind of goes against how this is all supposed to work. So I think the way you're proposing is simpler. So I'll do that. Okay, thank you.
Okay. And I didn't think of doing it quite that way until I listened to your explanation today. So
Okay.
it's not that I sandbagged you or anything.
No, I
But,
appreciate the feedback. Okay.
So we're not going to.
We're not going to exec it at this time because, again, often with a piece of property, anything that clouds the title, can be a major problem, a major expense for people.
Sure.
And just to make sure that that disclaimer, is filed, with the Register of Deeds, such that it can be filed. I mean, the disclaimer may have been filed with probate court, but unless it got to the Register of Deeds, if I'm researching that title,
Sure.
I may not find that disclaimer.
Sure. Right. No, I agree. Okay.
Senate Bill 248. Senate Bill 248 is an issue that has come before us several times. I think that the Supreme Court decisions cloud what we can and cannot do. And if a corporation is a person, not a natural person, as defined by the law, I guess I am not in favor of passing this bill, and were I to make the motion, it would be interim study.
I move interim study, Mr. Chair.
We have a motion for interim study. Do I have a second? I will second it. Further discussion? All those in favor of interim study, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. Get a 5-0. And do I
Consent?
have a motion for consent? I have a motion for consent, and I'll second it. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? 5-0. And who would like to take this one out?
I'll take it out.
Okay.
Taking it out. Are you taking it out?
Do you want to try the 251?
Yep, that's next on my list. Senate Bill 251.
Yeah, this is the Advisory Tax Board of Tax and TIF districts. I I brought an amendment down, or I approached the amendment with OLS, and she was having a little bit of difficulty, I think, kind of trying to understand what I was trying to do. So we have our illustrious attorneys here, can make sure that this is what we want. Because the concern from the Municipal Association was that there would be, without some parameters around it, there would be a majority of business owners on the advisory board versus actual owners of property. So what it looks like it does, it says the legislative body of the municipality shall create an advisory board for each development district that ensures fair representation of business and community interest. The board shall consist of such numbers appointed or elected. A majority of members shall be owners or occupants of real property within the community. I think that specifies that it has to be community owners. And at least one member shall be of an owner or occupant of real property within the development district. Does that?
So, I think the concern was that by changing the language, it would allow, there was the possibility that it would allow that no members
the
of the board
community.
are from the affected district. Like, so I think what it's saying is the majority of members shall be owners or occupants of real property within the development district, but it doesn't preclude the remainder of the board being members of the community. So I guess I was just trying to understand if maybe the existing language addressed your concern, but it probably doesn't, because otherwise you wouldn't be bringing this, so.
No, I'm only bringing it up because I just want to verify that the language is what we wanted to do. And I see Senator Soucy's not too.
I'm not sure. I hear what Senator Perkins Cook is saying.
It could be as simple as, under no circumstances shall the majority of the board, or the majority of the board shall be members of the community.
So you're trying to expand. I guess the question I have is why we're using the word community as opposed to municipality, because the language before said you had to be adjacent to the district, so you want to try to keep it confined, but by removing that, so if we were talking about a district, let's say on Elm Street in Manchester, and then you have no one from if you just say community, technically that's the whole city, right? So you could have someone from the farthest parts of the city serving on the board without people most directly impacted. I think it's the word community that I'm.
Yeah,
Because I know what you're trying to say is you want to expand it a bit, but.
right.
Yeah, I think what they're looking to do is be able to have a business owner or someone who has an interest in the TIF district on the advisory board. But they don't want it to be a majority of business owners.
Okay. This is another way to do it, would it perhaps accomplish your intent if it read, a majority of members shall be owners or occupants of real property within or adjacent to the development district, period. The remainder of members can be members of the municipality or the community, because it would leave the existing language how it is, which ensures that there are representatives of the district on the board, but it clarifies that for the remainder of that board, you could bring in business owners from the community.
Can you say that again?
Sure. So we would reverse your change in line 6, but then we would add in a sentence to clarify something like the remainder of members.
Wait, so it would say the legislative body of the municipality shall create an advisory board for each development district that ensures fair representation of business and community interest. You want to reverse that?
Do I not have an amendment here? I'm looking at as introduced.
Ah,
Maybe we're all
says-
having a conversation about something.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I have a copy of the amendment.
Oh, really? Oh, how silly of me.
Oh, no.
Okay.
That's why we're.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, that would be great.
Great.
0751S. So as introduced, it says, "The legislative body of the municipality shall create an advisory board for each developmental district. The board shall consist of such number of members appointed or elected as determined by the legislative body. A majority of members shall be owners or occupants of real property within the community." That's what we changed. It would say property within or adjacent to the development district. And I think by expanding it to community, it included business owners, was the understanding.
I guess that, I just want to make sure, I guess for my part, it makes sense or is good policy to ensure that some members of the advisory board are from within the district. So I'm just trying to figure out how to keep those two elements both here. Because I don't have any objection to what you're trying to do. I do think what NHMA pointed out was that, at least as introduced, I don't have your amendment, it would allow, the entire board to be members that were from outside the district.
Right,
So.
and that's what I'm trying to prevent.
Yeah, okay.
To make sure that the majority of the board is from the community within and not business owners.
Okay, got it.
In Rochester, we have several TIFs. The two biggest TIFs in Rochester have to do with Airport Drive and the Granite Ridge Shopping Center, okay? And, as the various bonds are paid off, certainly, the board can try to do additional things that would be infrastructure, such that some people might think that the money that could be returned to the city, which is in excess of what they need to pay for the current bonds, would continue to go for that kind of thing. So I think that it is important to have community members that aren't members of the TIF or owners of real property of the TIF to be able to do certain things there. And,
I think we're all in agreement on that one.
all right. All right, so we've got 0751S.
Yep.
I think it works.
You do?
It has one member. I mean,
At least one, so it could be more. It would be discretionary, right?
Yep,
But
But
it's a floor.
right. But it says a majority of the members shall be owners or occupants of real property within the community and at least one member, so, okay.
Yeah, I feel better with the amendment. Now that we're
Okay,
discussing it all from the same
Sorry
page.
about that.
That's okay.
Okay. So we have an ought to pass, I believe, coming on Senate Bill 251.
I move ought to pass on Senate Bill 251.
And we have an ought to pass on Amendment 0751S
Yes.
by Senator Birdsall,
Second?
seconded by Senator Susie.
yeah. Okay.
Further discussion on the amendment? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? 5-0. Ought to pass as amended. Further discussion?
Move.
Seeing none? All those in favor ought to pass as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Consent?
Second?
We have a motion for consent. Now, All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And Senator Bertzel,
Yep,
since this is your bill,
yep.
stop talking about redistricting and all the newspapers and seem to go away, right?
Before I start, did anyone get the amendment for 405?
And I have the amendment for 334 whenever we're ready.
0856?
Yeah, 334 is passed.
I didn't know if we were ready. If you two want, ready to speak on it, then we can certainly do it. I
Well,
don't know that the amendment did all what I thought needed to be done.
I can pass the
Senate Bill
amendment
334.
around. Do you guys have it? 09H7? You have it? Okay. And we can determine as a group if it is ready.
Send it out today, but you do have it.
229?
Oh, 987.
Yeah,
I'm sure I have it.
I've got it.
You have it?
Yeah.
I do have it. Thank you so much.
Talk to pass on the bill so we can discuss the amendment.
Second. And we have Amendment 0987S brought by Senator Prentice, and essentially, because we were having trouble identifying with the appropriate specificity what should be considered vacant in order to establish a vacant property registry, Senator Prentice instead has switched this to a study committee to study blight and how it can be handled in our cities and towns. So the amendment is a replace all.
Okay, that's a big problem in Derry.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I hear about it from public safety. I mean, I think it's a good subject to take up,
And the owners aren't doing anything about it.
right?
And I think one of the problems is properly defining blight.
Yeah, exactly.
How to know when to take action, so perhaps the committee could,
Yeah. Is that one of the, shall study,
Definition of vacant abandoned real properties.
why don't we add blight, studied blight in there too? Or do you think it's covered under vacant?
Under B, maybe? But I'm open to
Yeah.
it.
So study the
Line 28.
definition of vacant, abandoned real properties and blight in New Hampshire?
so on the next line, it says the prevalence and
Prevalence.
scope of real
Okay.
property blight and problems.
Scope of real property blight.
And
We have a
it's got
definition?
Blatancy too.
Feasibility and purchasing. Okay.
And
I'm good.
you've got 2 and 2.
Yeah.
Is that what you guys want?
Well, I would prefer just one,
I was gonna say we could do one.
then it would be an odd number, so.
I would move a committee amendment to line 13 to have one member of the Senate.
And you also want to modify line 2 on page 2, I think.
Okay. I would move a committee amendment to line 2, page 2, to require 2 members of the committee to be a quorum.
Line 2. Quorum requirement.
So when is the report due?
OLS is doing some different things these days.
You want to move it to November 1st?
I'm fine with that, if be helpful. I'll move a committee amendment to change line 5 from October 15th to November 1st.
Okay.
Okay, so what we have in front of us is Amendment 0987S, which on page 1, line 13, would be changed to 1 member of the Senate. Page 2, line 2, to change 3 members to 2 members. And on line 5, to change October the 15th to November the 1st.
I move, did you already move the amendment?
I
Yes, you.
introduced it. Did I move it? Yeah, I think I moved it.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And ought to pass as amended.
Consent?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Do I have a motion for consent?
So moved.
Not if you're voting nay. We'd have to be unanimous.
No, I said,
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were saying, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. My apologies.
no,
Consent.
I was being
Yes,
good.
please.
You know. Consent. All those in favor of consent say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. And since, well, I didn't know, I figured one of you two would want to.
Sure, I can take it up.
I,
Oh,
I
so,
have no problem doing that. Sorry, did I take it from you, Senator Susie?
Not at all. There's plenty to go around.
Senate Bill 348, I've gotten an email from the Attorney General's office, but I haven't had time really to do anything with it.
Yeah, if we could hold off on that until next week, Mr. Chair, I actually have a question for you, because as I took the Attorney General's letter and I looked at the bill, there are a couple things that you've changed from his recommendation, and I don't know if that was intentional or not, so maybe we could talk
It
this week.
may not have been intentional.
Okay.
Because what I was provided when we started this was that there was a page of guidance that the Attorney General was handing people, and it was a draft, so.
Okay, well, if we could wait till next week, I think that would,
I also had hold next to
360.
absentee ballot outer envelopes, because that goes back to the things that we were talking about in the other. It's not an FN, so
Fair on both of those.
400 we've already taken care of.
Tricia is going to take, she's making copies of the amendment that I had drafted for 4 or 5. Because again,
Okay.
nobody got the amendment.
We've already talked about 418, and then
427.
Yep.
could we hold 427 to talk about in conjunction with your envelope bill? And just do the two at that time?
Yeah, we can,
If we could do that, I would appreciate it.
we're talking Senate Bill 427.
Yeah.
waiting
Doing
on
it at the
that.
same time as we do 365?
It's an SM, just an FYI.
Right, so it has to be done Monday.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So we're holding off until
Yes, ma'am.
I'm holding off on that, okay?
Thank you.
Four.
Yes, ma'am.
So this was Senator Geiger's bill. I talked to the Attorney General's office. He had given me some clarification language. This is only for those apparently that are removing signs from private property. He wanted to enhance.
This is only for those who violate the law with reference to removing or defacing political advertising on private property. So they, apparently he is trying to increase, subject to a civil penalty of $250 for each piece of political advertising, up to a maximum of $2,000. So this was language that the Attorney General's office had given me, so.
Okay, and this only replaces section 3 and 4.
Yeah.
Comments?
Do we need a motion?
Let me give them time since they've just gotten it.
That's true, sorry.
Okay, so he's taking out, so lines 20 through 24 of the original bill would be expanded. So there's one penalty for one set of provisions and then whoever violates.
It's basically, I believe, just adding up in 664:21. It's 5. It's changing B.
Yep.
And changing a little bit of C.
Yeah, so it completely rewrites B.
Yep. Because when you look at it, and it's been almost 2 weeks since I talked to him, when you reference back to like 664:16A,
Yep. Which is the push polling.
yeah, so it's really not a good reference. And it adds in a, hello, and it adds a D. and it adds an 8, Roman numeral 8.
So that deals with all of the polling stuff.
So in line 17, we have the change, the Attorney General may notify suspected violators, but in line 27, it still reads, the Attorney General shall notify suspected violators.
That's for,
Yeah, I think 66417, so that's where the may is, that's about removing property or defacing property.
Yeah.
And then I think the Roman
the Roman 8 refers back to the push polling.
66414, which is the push polling section.
Okay. Which I guess makes sense, but I guess I thought the concern was giving the Attorney General discretion to bring charges as it thought fit.
Say that again?
So in line 27, it says the Attorney General shall notify suspected violators of this section. And it's been a while since our hearing, so I'm not sure if this is right, but I thought the concern was that the Attorney General needs discretion to contact potential suspected violators at its discretion, which I think if we have shall,
Well,
Doesn't necessarily-
that would be, they are given the discretion in the pulling up the political signs.
okay, so we're intentionally not giving them discretion for the push polling.
We are giving them discretion with the, if you look D, the Attorney General may notify suspected violators of 664:16. Which is political advertising. But in Roman numeral 8, that has to do with push polling. And that does not give them the discretion. You are correct.
Got it, okay, so that is intentional.
It's two different violations.
Understood, okay.
In 17 through 21, if the Attorney General is not going to prosecute them, then I think they need the may in there so they don't have to say, I'm not prosecuting you.
It feels that way to me.
I mean, this, if you put shall notify suspected violators of the state's intention to seek civil penalties. So that would say if they, at some point, they need to send you a letter saying, no, I'm not going to prosecute you if it's a shall. If they decide not to prosecute you.
So they have to notify them if it's a negative.
So the may in there, you know,
Gives them the option.
6 years from now, when the guy says, you never sent me the letter, you violated. So I'm good with that, the may there in line 17. Are you?
In line 17 I am, I wondered if we wanted to make the change in line 27. But
27.
it seems that the intent was for it to be a shall. But my concern was the exact same, which is that the Attorney General normally would have discretion whether to prosecute.
I think with push polling, is it 664:14? Where is it? Oh, how did I get there?
Oh, no, 14.
Yeah.
I guess I don't have a problem with line 27 going from shall to may to be consistent.
Well, considering this is the language that the Attorney General gave me, I'm a little concerned about changing his language, to be honest with you. Because I'm not sure with push polling, because we've...
Was it his language or was it OLS's language?
No, I actually spoke with,
It's just unusual that you don't have prosecutorial discretion.
Well, I'll tell you what I'm
Senator
gonna do.
Perkins' focus.
yeah,
After we finish, we're gonna put this one on hold,
okay.
and we'll clear up that point and any other points that you guys bring up, and we'll do it. We'll add it to your workload on Monday in addition to the 2 bills that we just received from the House.
So that gives us like 4 or 5 for Monday to complete, which is good.
And I don't think that the 2 House bills should be
So-
all that time consuming.
Can I just
Yes, ma'am?
read this paragraph from Miles Matson? So based on our conversation, here's the language discussed. However, after talking internally, it would be cleaner to put the political advertising removed penalty in its own subsection, as the push polling provision appears to be unenforceable by court order. The language below would leave in place the current penalty for push polling, so it's already in there. And insert a new subsection B relative to the $250 to $2,000 fine for removing political. So it's not changing anything that's already in there.
Well, but everything from line 22 down is new. Because it says new paragraph, so
On the
Yeah.
the
amendment.
shall notify on 27 is a new section that doesn't already exist.
But it refers back to 664:14.
Right?
So, but
Which,
it's fine for
Didn't-
clarification if we want to look at,
yeah, I think that's the only question, is the
Shall
distinction
versus
between
may.
shall to may in line 17 and line 27.
okay.
All right. So the 2 bills that I've added to the schedule for next week is House Bill 1029 relative to the Claremont Police Commission. I'm sure that'll be a rousing discussion, but I don't see it taking
What?
the whole time. And then 1397 relative to the length of terms of the Rockingham County officers. We've got a couple of us that represent Rockingham County, so we'll go from there. And anything else before we come out of executive session?
We have our marching orders.
I hear a motion to come out of executive session.
So moved.
And seconded, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And our business being completed, we stand adjourned. And now this mess to clean up. I still have one of the sign-in sheets.
We've got, we have 6 Senate bills left in total.
Hit the button if you will.
Oh, yep.